Welcome everybody to the podcast. We are live. Welcome everyone to the Play-by-Play Podcast. I am Brendan Donald, and as always, I am joined by Sterling. And again, we have returning guest Josh back on the podcast. So how's everyone doing today, guys?
Doing great. Beautiful Saturday outside. Warmer, so the snow's melting. Not a whole lot of football news going on, but it's okay. Nice, relaxing day.
Yeah, how about yourself, Josh?
Pretty good. Just enjoying the Saturday and got the window open here, just enjoying the breeze. Can't be too upset.
Yeah, so awesome. But first thing I want to do is right before the podcast started, we were having ourselves a good little hockey discussion, and I figured we might as well jump right back into that because it was a fairly good discussion. So what we were talking about was Gretzky. You guys are saying you don't think Gretzky is the greatest hockey player of all time. I want you guys to kind of take the lead on that one, why you don't think he is the greatest of all time.
I guess I'll open it up real quick. I don't think he's the greatest of all time for the simple fact that I think the game's evolved a little bit to the point that and obviously there's the argument that the equipment is better suited for faster play style and harder shots, but I think the players and goalies are a lot more athletic and flexible. Because like when in Gretzky's era, did you ever see Carey Price do the splits and grab one from the top corner with his glove? Like I don't remember seeing highlights like that in his era.
No, and I mean Gretzky was he was an excellent goal scorer, but that was really it. He was a one-way player. He wasn't the best defensive player on the ice by far. He wasn't the best back checker on his team. He wasn't the best enforcer or anything. He could score goals. That was pretty much it. Occasionally he was throwing those assists in there as well, but he was offense only player. And I think for the best player, you need to be an all around player.
Yeah, for me, the way that I look at Gretzky, and the reason I do say he is the greatest hockey player of all time is just simply you just have to look at the numbers. And I know we always like to say is that you can't always look at numbers and say that tells the entire story. But when you have the numbers that Gretzky has, no one will ever replicate the numbers that he has. No one will ever get close. The person who's closest to breaking his goal record is still like 150 to potentially even closer to 200 goals away to even getting that, and that's Alex Ovechkin. And the other stat that I look at is that if you take away all of Wayne Gretzky's goals, he still holds the record for the most points ever scored in an NHL career. And yeah, we do have to look at the time of going, there was smaller pads. The players definitely, or the vast majority of players definitely weren't as good as, say, today. Today's athletes are freaks. Like, an average NHL player today would be a superstar back then. But the same point, we still look at a bunch of these other guys, like for instance, Mario Lemieux. You look at his points per game versus Gretzky, playing not too dissimilar time period, he still has a lower points per game than Gretzky does. Yeah, he played a shorter career, but if they played the exact same amount of games, Gretzky would still be leading him by like hundreds of points. And so for me, that's why I look at it. It's going, yeah, Gretzky played at a vastly different time. And do I think Gretzky would be as good in today's game? I don't think he would be as good, but I still think if you put a prime Wayne Gretzky in the NHL today, he'd still be a fairly solid player. We'd still be talking about him as being a top 5 player in the NHL.
Or is that Mark Messier? Was Mark Messier the feeder to his career? Sort of like that Pippen to Jordan role, but I mean they're always surrounded. You want to surround talent with great talent. That's how you get the best out of them.
Oh, for sure.
So I get it.
But I mean, like in all the leagues, the quality level has changed vastly. If you took players from today and put them into the 80s and the 90s, they would destroy these records that guys like Michael Jordan and Wayne Gretzky and like Jerry Rice were setting. You know, like all these records were years ago, before all these changes to rules and equipment. And as Josh said, the athletes have gotten much more intense. You know, like they've got better training facilities. They've got way more training staff around them to help them, you know, really hone their skills. And so that's my only issue with taking a guy from the 80s and calling him the best ever.
Yeah, I always say it's hard to kind of compare. The one that I always say to people is you can't really compare Michael Jordan to LeBron James because they played in two different leagues. And so like I do agree with you. It's hard to compare like two of the greatest of all time at their respective sports just because they did it at such different times. And you know, with when you look at the Michael Jordan, you know, versus LeBron James, you always go, well, Michael Jordan had Scottie Pippen with him, who is arguably one of the best basketball players of all time. You know, he essentially had a super team around him, and Michael Jordan didn't really start winning championships until, you know, we had a bunch of those pieces sit around him. And you know, we always like to shit on LeBron James for having super teams, but in the NBA, that's the way you win, is that you only have 5 guys on the court and you only need 3 superstars to win.
Well, and that's a good point. I mean, talking about hockey as well, is you only have 5 guys on the ice. I know you've got 4 lines, but if Gretzky didn't have all those tools around him in Edmonton, do you think he scores 80 goals still in one season?
No.
Right? Like if he's playing for like Toronto in the 80s or something like that, you know, is he going to be getting that many goals? No.
For sure. But then you also have to look at
it was a high stick. It was a high stick. They should have called it.
What?
When the Leafs were robbed by the LA Kings, that was a high stick.
Oh.
That was a high stick.
Well, Sterling and I were very confused for a sec there. Just like,
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you guys ever get the opportunity, go watch that on YouTube. It's like the guy's bleeding, blatant high stick, and then Gretzky takes the puck and then goes and scores the game winner. It's really bad, and they just kind of look the other way. They're like, oh, it's fine.
Yeah. But you also got to talk about a guy, for instance, like Leon Draisaitl. You know, he's considered a top 4 hockey player in the NHL, and maybe not just the NHL, but the world. But, you know, is that just because of Connor McDavid with his level of success? And then you kind of have to look at that the exact same way of, you know, Connor McDavid, definitely his career has been boosted by the level of play with Leon Draisaitl right beside him. And I think that's something that you always see surrounding the greatest players at their individual sports, is they always have someone there who is helping them. I think there's probably only really one player that you could really say didn't really have that defining superstar player that helped him all throughout his career, and that's Tom Brady. But the only other issue with that is you'd say, well, he had Bill Belichick there with him. Because when you look at
Alex Ovechkin.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, was Alex Ovechkin.
Alex Ovechkin is you know, he's constantly at a rotating door as his left wing, his right wing.
Oh, for sure. But Ovechkin's only managed to win 1 Stanley Cup. And when you look at all these other guys, it's they always have multiple championships, but they always have a superstar around them. And when I look at Tom Brady, he was kind of like Alex Ovechkin, where he always had this revolving door of players coming in and out of his team. And the only kind of X factor, I would say, is Bill Belichick being there. And then, you know, obviously when Brady left and he went to Tampa Bay, it was very clear it wasn't solely Bill Belichick. Because I think that's probably what all of us thought when, you know, Brady went to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It was, okay, we are truly going to see if it was Bill Belichick or if it was Tom Brady. And, you know, it was a combination of both, but it was definitely Tom Brady.
Or was it Devin White? Was it Via Veda? Was it Nadonic and Sue? Was it some of those boys that really helped them out, like some of that all-star defense, you know, offensive line, one of the best left tackles in the league, things like that. it's hard to judge who really was the Batman and Robin in the relationship, because I do believe Brady went to a seriously overpowered team.
Oh, without a doubt, he did. You look at
Yeah,
the year before the Bucks. With Jameis Winston, he was 30 for 30, and they didn't even manage to make the playoffs. And you put, a capable quarterback such as Tom Brady in that team, of course they're going to go and win a Super Bowl.
but you look at the rosters that Tom Brady had around him too, and all of those Super Bowl wins he did have superstars with him, whether it be on offense or defense. All those times he lost and wasn't in the championship picture, those were the years where it was sort of on Tom Brady's shoulders. He wasn't able to do it all himself. And I think that's like, we're all making the same point, is that no one guy can do it all themselves.
Yeah.
They need a cast around them.
Exactly.
I mean, more controversy real quick. Was it a fumble or an incomplete pass?
Well, even Tom Brady now has admitted, it was a fumble. It was a fumble. The tuck rule. Even Bill Belichick, like, he's probably the only person that says is like, yeah, I knew the rule. It was the tuck rule. Like, who the hell heard of the tuck rule before that game? I was still fairly young at that point. What was that, 2001? So I might have been 4 or 5 at the time. Throwing a little bit of my age there, but
I got a talking point. This is a rumor. I'm not sure if it's true, but kind of interesting from football, but also kind of the money side of things. Apparently, Sean McVay was offered $100 million to go do analyst or to be a broadcaster for Amazon Thursday Nighters or sports. I'm not sure the development of the network, but he was offered $100 million over 5 years. So he turned it down, which makes me think the Rams are going to offer him more potentially. What's your guys' thoughts?
I don't necessarily think the Rams are potentially going to offer him more. I think they would be putting themselves in a serious dilemma. For instance, if they're trying to give him $100 million, because the last time a coach in the NFL got $100 million, that was John Gruden, and that was a 10-year contract that they gave him. And I don't know if the Rams are necessarily going to give him a 10-year contract, because that is a hell of a commitment. And, when we see the guys like Aaron Donald leave this team, like the Rams, and they're not going to be a juggernaut. I still think the Rams are going to be a really good team next year, but I think after next year, that team is going to be in some serious problems because they have no draft capital, and you need young players constantly coming into your organization to compete. And once that Rams team does start to struggle again, it's like, okay, you can't have a coach sitting there trying to rebuild a team and paying him, $10 million a year for the next 10 years. I think Sean McVay just simply looked at that and he was like, I'm a coach. I want to coach. No matter how much money you're going to throw at me, I'm going to come here and coach the game that I love. And, down the road, it's say 4 or 5 years, if he doesn't want to coach anymore and he feels that he's accomplished everything, I'm sure that deal will still be on the table. Maybe not for the exact same price, but they're going to look at him and be like, yeah, you are one of the most intelligent people in football at such a young age. So come on down.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I think it was a personal choice. I don't think the Rams will offer him more, but I think Sean McVay looked at it and was like, I just won a Super Bowl as the youngest coach ever. Why would I walk away from this now?
Yeah.
I potentially got another 20 years ahead of me where I can be a coach in this league doing what I love. Why would I go and sit and talk about it like Tony Romo and Chris Collinsworth when I've still got a full career ahead of me doing coaching?
And that's
so I think
it's
a purely personal choice of Sean McVay is going, yeah, great, throw $100 million at me. I want to coach, though. It's not about the money for him at this point in his life. He's having fun. He's doing what he loves, and he would be crazy to walk away from it.
I agree.
Like one more question, I suppose. If you were Sean McVay right now, would you potentially consider picking a new destination that is not so strapped for draft picks and cap space?
I think it is definitely a possibility that he might want to look elsewhere. Not this year, I think for McVay, the smartest move for him to make is sign a 2-year contract and go, I still have a pretty stacked roster right now. I have Matthew Stafford. We don't know what is going to happen with Aaron Donald, whether he retires or stays. Even if Aaron Donald does retire, that defense is still a pretty top-notch defense. It's definitely going to take a massive hit for sure, but there's still going to be a phenomenal, phenomenal defense without a doubt. But I do kind of look at it and go, for him, it would be smart to go 2 years, still have a stacked team, see what happens the year after that. If the team isn't going the way that you want, obviously, at that point, it's going, okay, well, I can move away. And right now, all the head coaching spots are filled. So, he doesn't really have an option to go to, for instance, like a Jacksonville Jaguars, where they have, for instance, like the first overall pick, they have a really young and talented quarterback, and then he can build that team up. For him, like he kind of has to go back to the Rams or go into the broadcast, and I don't see him leaving LA. Sean McVay is an LA guy.
Yeah, and I mean, if I'm Sean McVay, I stay in LA as well. You've got a championship caliber team right now. Even if you lose Aaron Donald, you still have a playoff caliber team. And then that just gives you the opportunity to showcase your abilities as a coach more and see if you can coach your team back to the Super Bowl. And yeah, he's still got Matt Stafford on offense. He's got Cooper Kupp. He's got an okay offensive core around that. There's a good chance still that they sign Juju Smith-Schuster this offseason as well, which gives them another tool. Who knows if OBJ goes back? They could have one of the best looking passing offenses next year. Yeah, I would sign a 2 to 3 year deal. I would try to get in with management as well and be like, hey, can I have a little more input on what we do in future years? And I would take the Mike Tomlin approach and be like, look, I want to be here and build a dynasty for the next 10, 15, 20 years, but you guys got to meet me halfway, and he's got to make some moves so that I've got some draft capital finally. We can't keep building our team through trading away our draft picks. Eventually, it's going to catch up with us. At some point, this LA team is going to need to shift their outlook and start looking towards building young players. They're going to need a first-round pick sometime soon. They need a quarterback to replace Matt Stafford at some point. And so they need to stop trading away all of their draft capital, and they need to start really looking towards their future. And I think that's going to be the big thing for this Sean McVay contract, is he's going to be telling them, look, we've got our Super Bowl now. We've got a good team still. Now we need to start looking for the future.
Okay, so I guess I hate asking questions about this, but it's so interesting. So one last question to both of you then. If that was the case, if you went back-to-back Super Bowls in a hypothetical situation, would you consider trading Matthew Stafford and a couple other pieces just to regain some draft capital, Jalen Ramsey, things like that, kind of signaling that I'm ready to redraft for a year or two?
Yes.
Yeah, without a doubt. Without a doubt.
If somebody actually offered me like first-round picks for Matt Stafford like another year from now, I would jump on that.
Yeah, I think if Matthew Stafford, for instance, if they do go back-to-back, if Matthew Stafford goes back-to-back Super Bowl championships, he's retiring the year after. He knows. I think everyone kind of knows next year the Rams are in their last year of this Super Bowl caliber team, just because the last time they've had a first-round pick was Jared Goff. And they're not going to have a first-round pick until like 2024. So, yeah. And I think their first pick in this year's draft is all the way like the last pick in the 3rd round, which at that point, you're getting a guy who realistically at that point is a rotational guy. He's not really going to be a starter year 1, but he can contribute, but he's not going to be a main focus. He's not going to be a first round pick going like, okay, this guy is going to be a starter day 1 and he's going to make a phenomenal impact. And yeah, trading a guy like Jalen Ramsey, at like, let's say next offseason, if you were able to get a first round pick back for a guy like Jalen Ramsey, of course you're going to take that. And I don't think anyone would be too upset with the Rams if they basically at that point just looked at their entire roster and said, no one is safe. Everyone can go. We are going to rebuild this thing and we're going to try to do it quickly. We're going to suffer for 2 to 3 years, but then we're going to be right back to where we are.
I
See,
think
and
if they
that's
went
where,
into serious fire sale, I think they could do it in a year.
yep.
It's really
If
hard to
they,
do it in a year after a fire sale. I say the quickest turnaround you could see is a 2 year.
That's fair.
and that's if they go out and improve their front office staff, especially in the scouting department. You know, they need to be able to be getting these third round, fourth round, fifth round pick guys that after a year of development, they are ready to be starters in the league. And that is what LA is lacking. So that's something Sean McVay would need to do is, you know, if he's got somebody in mind that is a really good scout, that's somebody he should be like, hey, I want to bring this guy in to start helping us build this team for the future. You know, because that's what they need to do. Like, if your first pick is at the end of the third round, you should, if you're a good drafting team, you should be able to take a guy there and have him be your number one guy by next season. Not this season, but next season. And
Yep.
that's the important thing. You know, there aren't a lot of teams in the league that are capable of it, but it is the key to maintaining a successful franchise year after year after year, is to be able to take those mid-round picks, 3, 4, and 5, and have them being your starters within 3 years, within their rookie contract. They have to be starting on your team, and they have to be good.
Yeah, and one of the biggest things, especially when it comes to draft picks, is you always look at guys in rounds 1 and 2 as these flashy picks of like, oh, I can't believe we got this guy. He's going to help improve our team and be such a superstar for us in the future. But rounds 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, those are the most important picks in the entire draft. Like, if you gave me, for instance, if you said to me, you are only going to have one pick and it's the first overall pick, or you can have a pick in round 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, I'm taking 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, because the chance of me getting one superstar out of those guys and having consistent role players and role guys, as opposed to maybe having one of the best players in the NFL, I'm gonna take the potentially one superstar and role filling guys as opposed to that, because you need to be able to build and fill out a roster.
Yeah, and that's the philosophy I use around the draft as well, is like round 1 and round 2 are picks for now, picks for this season. Round 3 through 7, that's picks for the future. That's next season. You know, and that's the way teams need to be looking at it, is, you know, your 1 and your 2, those guys are starting this year, you know, or at the very least, they're playing half the snaps throughout the season. You know, if they're in a positional, you know, a linebacker position where you're rotating guys through. And then those later picks, you never know. Sometimes you hit a gem in the 4th or 5th rounds, and you got a guy. You know, but that's where you need to spend the money on intelligent guys that know how to scout properly and can find these gems in players and these coachable players. You know, like the 1st and 2nd round tend to be just raw talent. After that, you've got guys who are typically more intelligent and able to be coached. That's the important thing. You can have a raw talent guy in round 4, but if you can't coach him, he's never going to break your roster.
Yeah, and the way that I've always gone about looking at prospects is, and the way that I determine if a player is worthy of going in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, all these rounds, is if you're a 1st round guy, if I'm drafting you in the 1st round, you are a starter day 1. There's no competition. You are coming in, you are winning that job. I'm not going to give you the job. You have to win that. Doesn't matter if you're, Mitchell Trubisky versus Nick Foles. It's like, if I'm drafting you in the 1st round, I don't care if it's 32nd overall. You are going in there and I expect you to win the job and be the outright starter. Round 2, I expect you to win that job and be the starter, but you know what? If you don't fully get all the starts through the entire year, I'm not super worried. 3, I'm expecting you to be a rotational guy. 4, 5, and 6, you're a backup kind of rotational, key guy. 7th, I'm just going on a flyer. I'm just hoping that you could be something for me. But yeah, that's the way that I always view it. And that's kind of why I don't like when you see a quarterback get taken in the 1st round and then he sits. It's because you could go after a guy who is going to contribute to you right now for your team. And obviously quarterback is the most important position in football. But yeah, I've never liked that philosophy of drafting a guy and letting him sit, Just look at what the Packers did with Jordan Love a couple of years ago. He's been in the league. He's going into his 3rd year, and he's played, one total game and gotten a handful of snaps. He is the only rookie quarterback to not dress as a first-round pick in his rookie season. He didn't dress a single game in his rookie season. Like that, you want to talk about a wasted pick. Like
That's the one position I disagree with you on, as you know. Like a quarterback, if you've already got a superstar quarterback who's quite aged and you're looking for the future, that is the smart play, is to take one in the first round and let him learn behind who you already have. Unfortunately, we had this weird hiccup in the league where these veteran quarterbacks for some reason didn't want to mentor the guy coming in behind them. We saw it with Aaron Rodgers and Jordan Love. We saw it with Ben Roethlisberger and Mason Rudolph. Both of them, for some reason, they got butthurt over that pick, even though they were both told, this guy isn't being drafted in the first round to replace you now. He is here to learn from you and become your successor. And for some reason, those guys just lost their shit over it, where they could have assisted their team, because let's be real, both of those players stayed with the one team their whole career. That is their team. And you could have assisted them in becoming a deeper franchise that is going to continue their success for another decade.
Yeah, the difference between the Jordan Love pick and the Mason Rudolph pick is Rudolph was a 3rd-round pick.
Yeah.
And for me, people say like, the only time you're ever really going to find a quarterback is the first round, occasionally in the second round. But Russell Wilson, he is one of the best quarterbacks in the league, 3rd-round pick. Dak Prescott, as much as we like to shit on the Cowboys, he has slowly but surely turned himself into a top 10. I'm not going to say a top 5 quarterback, but he's definitely, without a doubt, a top 10 quarterback, and he was a 4th-round pick. Tom Brady, the GOAT, was a 6th-round pick. But
and that is where you need the talent in your scouting department.
Yep.
You need guys that can go out and see, okay, this person has flaws, but they're coachable. These are all things that we can fix, and we can turn this guy into a superstar.
Yes. So speaking of draftable players, the next segment that we are going to jump into, I like how we kind of went talking about some of these draft prospects, is obviously last week we talked about free agency and stuff like that. And Josh, we're going to get some of your takes on that. But I want to know for you guys, who are some players that you are looking at your team that you think are some realistic players at the time that you're going to be drafting? Steelers are pick 20, and I think the Commanders are pick 11. I could be wrong.
Yes, it is
11.
It is pick 11.
Yeah, so for both of you guys, I want to know, who do you think is a realistic prospect at that time? Who's your dream prospect for this draft? And who do you think is a prospect that you'd like to kind of have if they're there and the rest of your guys aren't? So Sterling, or Josh, I'll let you go first since you're pick 11 here.
Okay. At pick 11, I'm hoping they grab the best offensive lineman possible. I'm not sure who that would be. Obviously, my dream pick would be Evan Neal, but he's going to be picked probably first, if not second. He would obviously, maybe even a trade up to get an offensive lineman. Losing Brandon Sheriff, we don't really have a left tackle. I think the pressing need is an offensive lineman in this draft, and maybe grabbing the second or second best offensive lineman might be the way to go, because it's looking like some of these edges are going to be scooped up by some of these teams. And edge isn't necessarily a problem for us. We need some serious GM work here. I think Daron Payne, or like I said, I know other people like him, but I think Montez Sweat potentially, could be on the move for a first round pick, and we can maybe back it up by drafting a quarterback later for one of those players. Maybe a Sam Howell or something like that for a backup role or potential starter in our situation. But I'd be looking to draft with number 11, an offensive lineman, and trading one of the defensive linemen for a quarterback pick. That's what I would be doing.
Yeah. So around that time, you're looking at a guy like Charlie Cross, offensive tackle from Mississippi State, or potentially even a Tyler Lindenbaum. is he's a center. He's a center, and he can definitely come into the NFL and play guard. But I said this in the podcast where we talked about my mock draft. I think Tyler Lindenbaum is the best offensive lineman in this draft. The thing is, he is a center, and centers don't get picked up in the top 10. You hardly ever see an offensive lineman that's not a tackle get taken in the top 10.
Well, that's where, that could work out, because Linderbaum could fall far enough that he's getting picked at 11 by Washington.
Yeah, I think that would be a phenomenal pick. Obviously, we see with Washington, it looks like most of the draft experts are giving them a quarterback. So, Josh, I kind of want to know your opinion. If you see the Commanders select a quarterback like Malik Willis or Matt Corral, what would be your kind of opinion on what the Commanders?
Are you forcing me to pick a rookie, or are you asking me should they trade that pick for potentially anyone else?
No, I'm saying, like, if Washington, the commissioner walks up to the draft board and goes, with the 11th pick, the Washington Commanders select Matt Corral. What are you doing?
I'm upset. I think Malik Willis is the only quarterback worth our time, because I believe Kenny Pickett will be taken by Denver. I think he's going to go to Denver, so I don't think we have a shot at him. But this is obviously without all these trade speculations. But yeah, I like Malik Willis. I understand he's raw and he needs to sit a year, and there's not a lot of mentorship. But this is a fan base that's pretty hungry for a game changer. Like, we don't want mediocre. We've had mediocre for years, so I like the gamble on Malik Willis.
Yeah, I think Malik Willis. One thing I've been saying with this entire draft class is, whoever has their quarterback, whoever's number one quarterback is, or whoever the person is, their number one quarterback, they could potentially have my number 5 quarterback as their number 1 and my number 5 as their number 1. I look at Malik Willis and I say he's probably my number 3 quarterback on the draft board. But again, like, the top 5 guys you could interchange like there's no tomorrow this year. But yeah, when I look at Malik Willis, I kind of get a little bit of RG3 in him, but just a little bit raw RG3.
And that's the thing, man. Like, we're talking about what he could be, what he might be. This is an organization that has just struggled, like, just absolutely struggled with picking a quarterback, finding our franchise guy. Would I trade 2 first-rounders and 2 second-rounders for Russell Wilson or Deshaun Watson? Absolutely. Absolutely, I would, because we just don't have an identity. We need to rebrand. We need to win a couple games here. And frankly, if we go get Deshaun Watson or Russell Wilson, is he not the second or third best quarterback, assuming Aaron Rodgers goes to the Broncos? Like, he might be the third or second best quarterback in the NFC, let alone the NFC East. So, I'm all for them going all in on a quarterback at this point. And I think, with $66 million of free space, I think Allen Robinson is that receiver you put across Terry McLaurin, and you build a contending team with a structurally sound defense ready to go.
Yeah. I
think that's
hear
what you do, but
yeah, those are smart moves for sure. Unfortunately for you, I've been reading a lot of rumors that it looks like Pittsburgh's now the top possibility for Deshaun Watson, since they signed Brian Flores.
And that's the best. That is the best thing for Deshaun. That is the best thing for Deshaun. And for his career, unselfishly, that is the best spot for Deshaun Watson.
Oh, yeah. If he can play week 1 in Pittsburgh and get that trade, then yeah, that's the best possible outcome for both Pittsburgh and Deshaun Watson. Because immediately we go from a Hall of Fame quarterback to another potential Hall of Fame quarterback. Like, immediately, no growing pains whatsoever.
And can you blame Mike Tomlin for saying to his front office, like, I don't want to develop and go through the carousel of quarterbacks to end my, coaching career here? I don't blame him. I don't want to do that either.
Sure. Like most coaches, they get defined by their quarterback and the fact of either they can develop or they can get a guy in there that they can work with and turn into a championship caliber team. And for Mike Tomlin, he was gifted Ben Roethlisberger when he took the job, and it was okay. Well, you've had a year or two in the NFL. We know what you're capable of doing. Let's go win some championships, and they did.
Mm-hmm. That being said, if Mike Tomlin and Brian Flores are able to talk Kevin Colbert into making a trade, because you're going to have to give away your first round pick this year, next year, second round picks as well, and probably someone like Devin Bush, so a former first top 10 pick, and you go get Deshaun Watson, you are on the hot seat week 1. Like, you have to make the playoffs. You have to make the Super Bowl next year if you go out and you spend all that draft capital to get Deshaun Watson. No ifs, ands, or buts. If the Steelers aren't in the Super Bowl next year, then Mike Tomlin is probably fired for that move.
I don't think he's fired. I think you have to guarantee a playoff.
Okay, he's not fired unless it comes down to, you didn't win because of these character plays. Like if Chase Claypool's still costing games because he's taunting, if you've got guys acting out in the locker room and doing TikTok dances and getting flags, that kind of shit, zero tolerance if you convince management to spend all of their draft capital for the next 2 years from a team that never spends draft capital in that. The only time we've really done it was Minkah Fitzpatrick.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And that is one of the moves, but I think if Pittsburgh does decide to go out and give, let's just say, this year's first, next year's first, and this year's first, and next year's second, or the 2 firsts and 2 seconds for the next 2 years, and give out Devin Bush, you're looking at that team going, okay, maybe Juju Smith-Schuster looks at the team and goes, yeah, I could play with Deshaun Watson. Like,
Yep.
That could potentially be his best opportunity at going after a Super Bowl. And I think Mike Tomlin, again, if the character issues in the locker room don't get fixed, then that is a big issue that needs to be talked about, especially if they don't make the playoffs. But I think with a guy like Deshaun Watson, you throw him in a Pittsburgh, scheme, Matt Canada, I feel like is going to be better utilizing Deshaun Watson than he did with old man Ben. But I think if you make the playoffs, it's good. You have to make it past the divisional round. I don't think you fire either Brian Flores or Mike Tomlin. For instance, like let's say they're in the wild card round and they lose to, I know you're gonna hate me for saying this, but Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals. You don't fire Mike Tomlin off of that move. You have to give him, like, I think if you let Mike Tomlin trade for Deshaun Watson, you give him 3 years with Deshaun Watson.
Oh, three's too long.
The reason I say 3 years is because the first year Deshaun Watson, he's gonna have to come into Pittsburgh, learn an entire new scheme, which you can ask any quarterback out there. The first year that they're in a new system, it takes them a long time to get used to. Second year, obviously you still have to be going on that upward trajectory. If, for instance, Pittsburgh, after the first year, gets bounced in the wild card round, the second year, they again get bounced in the wild card round, then yeah. But you know what? If they keep going on that upward trajectory, and let's say they lose in the divisional round the year after, going, okay, well, you know what? We moved up. And I think it is one of those situations, if, first year they don't make the playoffs, you're not going to fire Brian Flores.
You're not firing Brian Flores at all.
Or no, I meant Mike Tomlin. Mike Tomlin.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, you're not going to fire Brian Flores. But then you also have the opportunity.
Is Brian Flores that sneaky successor they brought in?
Yeah, that was one of the things that we talked about last week. Obviously, once the news broke.
Yeah, that's why you don't fire Brian Flores, because we discussed it. I hadn't even considered it until Brendan brought it up, but I think that was what that diversity hire was, is they're going, okay, Mike Tomlin, if we end up in a position where we have to rebuild, he might walk. And if he walks, we've got Brian Flores in the wings that we can promote to our head coach, and they believe that he could be the next guy.
He's a great coach.
He is a phenomenal coach.
And like what he did with Miami and the skill set they gave him, phenomenal. I know he had a losing record, but I mean that's a horrible horrible roster for how many draft picks they had. Their GM is brutal.
Oh,
Right. And
without a doubt.
the only reason that I say like 2 years max, that like they've got to win a championship within 3 or make the Super Bowl within 2 if you trade for Deshaun Watson, because you've realistically only got 2 to 3 years with this defense that we have right now before you have to start drafting and rebuilding it. And you're going to be trading away all your draft capital this year and next year to rebuild that defense with.
Yeah.
And so by year 3, you're drafting nothing but defensive players in that next draft in 2025, I think it would be. And so you've got to make sure that you're already championship quality team by that point. Or Mike Tomlin will be out.
You're not going to get a TJ Watt kind of caliber player with where you're finishing either, you know.
Well, and the question mark with TJ Watt, I love him. He's a phenomenal player, but like all the Watt brothers, they're too big. They get hurt easily because they're such large guys that their bodies just break down, you know? And so all it takes is one chop block or one bad block on TJ Watt, and we lose him for half a season or a whole season. And that completely changes the makeup of the defense. You know, he's one of those phenomenal players that he makes or breaks your defense. When he's on the field, you've got a great chance of winning. When he's off the field, you're almost guaranteed to not win. You know, we saw that this year. If we had him on the field for a couple more games, I think we're playing for that division with Cincinnati as opposed to trying to just barely squeak in with a wild card.
So imagine this, okay? Really picture this. You're Mike Tomlin, you're sitting at a table with your GM, owner's present, and, you know, they say to you, oh, we think we can draft a player and we want you to develop him. And you're sitting there knowing that you've been on the hot seat for a while now. You know, and your paycheck depends on you keeping your job at the end of the day, even though Tomlin would likely find another job. But I'm sure he's happy coaching the Steelers. You have to make sure in a division with Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow that you have a sure shit quarterback. You don't have time to play around and draft a quarterback carousel. I don't blame them for going all in on this move. And especially for Mike Tomlin's job security, I believe this is a safer alternative than, you know, the quarterback being a potential bust. And then the easy scapegoat is, well, let's blame the coach. You know?
I can understand that for sure. But, like, I'm not worried about the Pittsburgh Steelers this year, even without a quarterback. We could field Mason Rudolph. I think we're going to have one of the best rushing offenses in the league. And if we can shore up our defense so that we're not giving up 27 points a game and we can hold teams under 20 points a game, I think between Najee Harris and our defense, we can score 25 points a game and win enough to make the playoffs with just our running game.
It'll be definitely interesting to see for sure what happens there. But after we got Josh's takes, so Sterling, give us your draft prospects and the guys that you think are potential.
Yeah, like trading for Deshaun Watson completely out of the picture. There's 2 different ways I could sort of see the Steelers going with this. Now, if they stand where they are at pick 20, right now, a lot are projecting Malik Willis might fall that far for them. I don't think that happens. I think Malik Willis is gone before then. So I think if they stay at 20, they need to look at their offensive line. And ideally, if Kenyon Green is still available at that point, that would be a great option for them. Somebody they could line up beside Kendrick Green and have him be a guard, or he's versatile. He can play pretty much any position on the O-line. And so anywhere that we feel we're weak, we can move him to. So that would be ideal if we stay at 20, go for that O-line. But there have been rumors, which I like, because Pittsburgh is really high on Malik Willis right now. You know, I know originally they were looking at Kenny Pickett, but there's a lot of talk that Kenny Pickett's going in the top 10 for sure. Likely to somewhere like Carolina or Atlanta even. And so I don't think Kenny Pickett's an option anymore. I think the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to try and trade up to the 10th pick with the New York Jets and take Malik Willis there. And so I have a feeling they're going to package their first round pick this year and their first round pick next year, give it to the Jets, move up to that 10th pick, and take Malik Willis if he's still there. if, as you said, Denver reaches on him and decides to take Malik Willis at number 9, then Pittsburgh just stays right where they are. There aren't any other quarterbacks outside those two that Pittsburgh wants. It's Kenny Pickett or it's Malik Willis, or we're rolling with like Mason Rudolph. I think,
that's the thing. Washington is extremely high on Malik Willis, so they have to trade in front of Washington because, as you said, even though he's viewed as the third best prospect, he seems to be number 1 on everyone but Denver's draft board.
Because he's got the look of what the quarterback position is in the league right now. You know, he's not super tall. He doesn't weigh a ton. Like, he's not like that Ben Roethlisberger or you know, Matt Stafford sort of prototype. He's more of that run and gun style, like a Patrick Mahomes. You know, and I think that's why a lot of teams are high on him, because he's very mobile.
Yeah,
and that's why he will fit in really well with the Pittsburgh offense that Matt Canada wants to run. You know, Kenny Pickett would be more of a Ben Roethlisberger homage style pick. You know, he's taller, he's bigger, he is mobile, but Ben was mobile early in his career as well before he started getting all those knee injuries from all those sacks. You know, so that I think is what Pittsburgh will try to do. Kevin Colbert's shown in the past that he's not afraid to trade up if there's a guy that he's really confident in, even though he's not going to be the GM anymore. I'm still convinced he's working with Omar Khan, who will be his replacement. Unfortunately, the last time he did this,
Devin Bush.
It's looking right now like it was kind of a bust because they traded up to take Devin Bush with the 10th overall pick. But last season was Bush's first full season after a pretty bad injury. And so if we keep him on, he needs to show why he was a top 10 pick next year.
For sure.
He needs to come out. He needs to stop, you know, being afraid when he's playing that coverage, because he is. He's our off-ball linebacker. You know, TJ Watt is the guy that's going after the quarterback. Devin Bush is the guy that's supposed to be there swatting those balls down or picking those balls off and covering the tight ends and any of those crossing routes. And he just was not that guy this year. And that is a problem. He needs to really remedy that and grow as a player.
You're looking for Devin Bush to be more of the Roquan Smith type of linebacker, as opposed to what he was this year.
Exactly. You know, he was trying to get, well, he just couldn't bloody tackle this year. You know, the only time he was picking the ball off is floating down into his hands. And that's got to stop. You got to get in the quarterback's face and in a quarterback's head. And that's what Devin Bush has to do. But back to this year's draft, that is what I think Steelers need to do is, you know, if they can get Malik Willis at 10, you trade up to that 10th pick. Yeah. And you scoop him before Washington can get him.
I agree. And for the people potentially wondering why I have Malik Willis at my third quarterback spot, you know, as opposed to a lot of people who have him at number 1, is I do look at him and go, he is 6'1", 215 pounds. By no means is he a short quarterback. You know, we're seeing quarterbacks range from 6'1" to 6'3". That is the average. 215 pounds is by no means small. As for the weight for a quarterback, that is good size. We're seeing quarterbacks come in the league 210 to 230. That's about average. But yeah, for me, from what I saw from Malik Willis this year at Liberty, is he is extremely, extremely raw. And, you know, he has a phenomenal arm, can get a little carried away with it on occasion. He's a phenomenal, phenomenal athlete. And when I look at Malik Willis, out of all of these 5 quarterbacks, he has the highest ceiling, but he also has the lowest floor. And for me, that's why I always get a little bit worried with some of those guys, is because, yeah, if you can get him to where he's supposed to be, the top of the top potential, he's going to be one of these top 5 quarterbacks, potentially very much like a Deshaun Watson type of guy. But if you can't get him and he stays at his floor, you got like a Mitchell Trubisky type situation on your hands there, where it's just utter frustration, and you look at it, you go, you have so much talent, like how come, like there's just it's frustrating. And So for myself, I do look at Malik Willis and go, the team needs to develop him. I said the same thing about Kyle. Why am I forgetting his name? The kid who was drafted by the 49ers last year, 3rd overall. Like he was Trey Lance, thank you. He was so raw coming out of North Dakota State last year. He'd only played 14 college football games. And he was somehow the 3rd overall pick, ahead of guys like Justin Fields and Mac Jones, who won a national championship winner, and a guy who was in the national championship and looked like a generational talent while playing at Ohio State. And, someone said they looked at Trey Lance and went, this guy is so raw, but he has so much potential to be just utterly amazing. We haven't seen what Trey Lance is in the NFL yet. So for me, that's why I have Malik Willis as my 3rd quarterback, because he's in that weird spot of where his floor is so low, but his ceiling is so utterly high.
I agree, and most of the mock drafts I've looked at, they tend to have him as the 3rd pick off the board. Matt with Kenny Pickett, Matt Corral going before him. The only reason I think it would be smart for Pittsburgh to trade up and reach ahead of Matt Corral would be because of that athletic ability would fit so well with the Matt Canada style offense that he wants to run.
For sure. It is definitely a scheme fit.
Right. And it's almost going to be easier to take a quarterback out of college that is extremely athletic and teach him that playbook and just, slowly give him more throughout the season, kind of like they did with that really young offensive line they had this year. Whereas next year they're going to be better. They're going to be able to do a lot more running and then just slowly get Malik Willis involved in the game. Whereas someone like a Deshaun Watson is going to want to be the focal point of that offense, and so he's going to have to learn it a lot faster, and he's going to have to prove he's better faster as well. Whereas Malik Willis, there is going to be allowance for growing pains, and there's going to be forgiveness on bad interceptions thrown, bad play calls made, because he's so young and they know they're developing.
Yeah, it is one of those things.
They're saying that all these prospects are more so developmental quarterbacks, and that's the other thing too. I don't even know if most of these quarterback hungry teams, Denver, Pittsburgh, Washington, the ones that are truly at need and borderline contending, I don't know if the right call is to pick these developing quarterbacks. I really do believe that these 3 teams are going to make some serious free agent moves, whether it's for Aaron Rodgers, Deshaun Watson, and Russell Wilson. I think there is going to be some trades with these 3 teams, regardless, even if it's a brand new quarterback. Their window of opportunity just isn't there. And I think some of these developing guys might enjoy a spot, that's a bit better suited for them, such as the Bucks or, teams with great systems that can actually draft some of these guys. I think these quarterbacks are going to fall a little.
Well, I do agree with you there. I don't think it's in Pittsburgh's best interest to go after one of these quarterbacks this year. I mean, ideally, what they should be doing is standing at 20, letting Malik Willis go somewhere else, drafting that offensive lineman in Kenyon Green, and then going out in the 2nd round and shoring up the other side of their trenches by taking somebody like who was it I was looking at here? I was looking at maybe like a Cameron Thomas in the 2nd round, an edge rusher, or even a cornerback, Darian Kendrick, and shoring up their defense a little bit more. I think that's the better road, because next year's quarterback draft class does look much better with more developed quarterbacks already in place. And you roll with what you've got in Pittsburgh this year. Maybe you don't trade the farm to get Deshaun Watson, because as I said, you only trade for one of these quarterbacks if he's ready to go day one. And the only 2 that I think would be fits in Pittsburgh would be Deshaun Watson or Jimmy Garoppolo. And you can't trade the farm for Jimmy G. So you need to wait for San Francisco to hopefully release him and then sign him. And I don't know if that's really going to happen. I think the Niners are going to stand with Jimmy Garoppolo and keep him on the team at least until the start of the season.
Oh, without a doubt, they're keeping him until the start of the season.
other rumor mill too is the fact that you got to remember this. So Aaron Rodgers grew up in a 49ers fan. Now this is just fan speculation. On the draft day when the Niners were at the 3rd pick overall,
First overall pick.
They called the 49ers called the Packers to ask about Aaron Rodgers. They were willing to trade it. And then obviously the Green Bay Packers hung up the phone. But we're looking at a situation now where you could potentially say to the Green Bay Packers, hey, he's on his way out anyway. Are you sure you don't want Trey Lance again? And if you're Green Bay, are you not seriously considering that? Because I think he's a much better prospect than Jordan Love.
That would be John Lynch would never make that move. John Elway would make that move. But that would cripple the 49ers for their future. Because you only got Aaron Rodgers for 2 years maybe.
Yes, but would it guarantee a Super Bowl?
It would guarantee a Super Bowl, but at what cost? The John Lynch is not he's not like John Elway where he just wants one Super Bowl now. John Lynch is trying to build a franchise so that he can turn the 49ers into potentially the first 10 Super Bowl team.
Yeah, he's trying to go for another dynasty.
Exactly. That is what John Lynch wants. And so you're trading for Aaron Rodgers, so you're going to be giving Trey Lance. You also have to give up a first-round pick probably in next year's draft. So then you don't have a first-round pick this year. You don't have a first-round pick next year. Okay, so then you would have to trade your first-round pick from the year after. So then you're in an LA Rams sort of situation where you have no first-round picks. You're not going to be able to find your quarterback of the future easily. You're going to have to reach on a guy in a later round and hope you can develop him. I don't think that is the type of trade that the 49ers would look to make. We did discuss last week, Brendan and I, a trade between the Packers and the Niners where you see Jimmy Garoppolo go the other way, and then possibly a subsequent trade between the Niners and the Steelers to send Garoppolo to Pittsburgh and some more tools for Jordan Love like Chase Claypool and maybe some defensive players like Devin Bush to shore up in Green Bay. But I don't think the 49ers move Trey Lance for anything.
What's your maximum price? What's your maximum price for trading for Jimmy Garoppolo as a GM? Like, is first round, like, you just hang up the phone? Is it a second round? What does it look like?
If I'm a general manager and the San Francisco 49ers call me up and say, hey, we understand that you are a quarterback needy team. We have Jimmy Garoppolo. If you send us your first round pick, I'm hanging up the phone and I'm discrediting that GM from now on. I would never do business with John Lynch. I would feel that's an insult. I feel the most second rounders? Even that's an insult. I look at Jimmy Garoppolo and go, you know what? If you ask me to send a 4th round pick for Jimmy Garoppolo, I'm taking that deal. And here's why. You have a guy in Nick Foles who obviously won a Super Bowl. He was a Super Bowl MVP. And you know what? I don't really look at Jimmy Garoppolo and Nick Foles as two vastly different quarterbacks. I think Jimmy Garoppolo is a better quarterback than Nick Foles for sure. But at the same point, Jimmy Garoppolo hasn't proved he can win a Super Bowl. He's been able to get there, but that's off of the backs of a ridiculous defense and, Kyle Shanahan crafting one of the best offenses I've ever seen. The offense that we saw the year the 49ers went to the Super Bowl a couple years ago, it hit me so differently. That is the only way I will ever run an offense when we're playing Madden. Like, Sterling has seen me go from, he's seen me play. Like, that's literally the only way I will run an offense, is because it is so effective. And with Jimmy Garoppolo, we have seen him in certain games of where he does kind of fall back and not go to the top level and not be that great guy. I think Jimmy Garoppolo is a good quarterback, but the most I'm willing to send over to a team is a 4th round pick. To me, that is the most that I would send.
See, and I agree partially with you. Like, if I'm any GM in the league, yeah, I don't give up a 1st round pick for Jimmy Garoppolo. Like, I don't think that's worth it. If I'm Pittsburgh GM specifically, I would give up 2 second round picks. I would give up a second in this year, a second in next year, so that I could keep my first round pick, use it on an offensive tackle this year, and build up that offense better. And only for Jimmy Garoppolo, because Jimmy G played in almost exactly the style of offensive play scheme that Matt Canada runs when he was in college. And so he's already going to be familiar with it. He will be able to learn it faster than somebody like a Deshaun Watson. And I think he would be more effective quickly. But the other caveat to that is it has to be post-surgery, post-healing from that surgery, and the Pittsburgh Steelers have to be able to see him throw first to make sure that that throwing hand of his has healed properly, and we're not going from a surgically repaired elbow that's iffy in Ben Roethlisberger to a surgically repaired throwing hand in Jimmy Garoppolo that is also iffy.
Yeah. So yeah, for me, like that's kind of what I would go. Again, like you bring up another really good point is you have to see Jimmy Garoppolo throw. And another thing that we're not really talking about is how is his throwing hand after getting surgically repaired going to handle up in the cold?
Yes, very
Because
true.
Pittsburgh, cold town. Once it starts to get to the later months of October, playing a home game in Pittsburgh, it is cold, cold, cold. You know, we're all a bunch of Canadian boys, but even still, we're looking at Pittsburgh December time going like, yeah, I don't really know if I would want to watch a home game live in Pittsburgh. Same thing for me for Chicago, you know, December. I'm like, oh, yeah, maybe not. But yeah, so that is another thing that factors in there is how is he going to be able to throw in the cold? Because obviously, when he was with New England, he wasn't the starter. He really didn't play a whole lot during those cold weather games, and he's been in San Francisco the last couple of years, which is a nice warm climate, throwing the ball around. So it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, there's a lot of factors that have to fall into place for a Jimmy Garoppolo trade to make sense for a lot of teams.
Yeah. So we got everyone else's picks. So
before we get to yours there, like, you know, I mentioned my first round picks there, but you're going to be talking about your second round pick because that's all you've got with Chicago. I just wanted to mention real quick my second round picks because I do have some in mind for Pittsburgh as well.
Yeah, go for it.
And so we stand pat. We stick with Mason Rudolph for next year. We take an offensive tackle who's a probable guard player, and then second round, you know, we could potentially shore up our offense even further to make us a dominant run team by taking somebody like Darian Kennard, who's an offensive tackle, and that completely solidifies our offensive line for a dominant running game like I've been discussing, where we could still make the playoffs on our run game alone.
Oh, I think you guys already did.
What do you mean?
Like, I think you guys already made the playoffs on your run game with a brutal offensive line. Imagine, seriously, like, this is crazy talk. Obviously, right. I think your team is good enough, but imagine taking two linemen first and second overall, like what that could actually do to really, like that would put you guys in a perfect spot for the next year to draft a quarterback and be well protected, give him time, let him read the field. Like, I think taking two offensive linemen would not even be crazy for a first and second round pick for Pittsburgh.
No, I think that would be brilliant. The only way I think they don't do that is if those specific guys aren't in that spot, then maybe they shift over to building their defense better to stop those horrible run games that we had. You know, because that's the first time in Steelers history that they were giving up that many 100-yard rushing games.
Or for some odd reason, and you know, obviously this is just you know, if it happens, a top 3 or top 2 edge somehow falls to you guys at 11, you'd be crazy not to pick them either.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't trade up to get one of those top edge rushers.
One other thing before we transition to the Bears, the one thing I want to really see from this draft, and I'm, you know, if I'm the Bengals, I think the move is plain as day, and no one's talking about it at all. But the move they need to make is 2 first-round picks for Laramie Tunsil. His career is being wasted in the Texas organization. They have the money for him, and he is a sure shit ready to go left tackle. He's one of the best left tackles that's forgotten about in the league, and I'm sure he wants out of Houston. And I think, you know, for Joey Burrow, they don't have time to really play the game of oh, can we develop this guy? Like Joey can't take any more hits. He cannot. They can't afford to play the game anymore of, oh well, we'll prioritize this next year, or we'll take a gamble on this guy. No, you need to protect clearly one of the best assets in the NFL.
Oh, I 100% agree with you. And I think going after a guy like Laramie Tunsil is a really good move. I don't even think you have to give up 2 first-round picks to get him. I
Probably
think
not.
you give up this year's first-round pick for sure. And, maybe like a third-round pick next year. Houston's going to jump on that all day long.
Oh
And
yeah.
you get a guy who, like what you said, is one of the most slept on left tackles in the NFL. Is he a top 5 left tackle? No. Top 7? Yeah, for sure. I'd definitely put him in that 7, 6, 7 category for sure. And to give up a first round pick, just look at what, for instance, look at what, you know, uh, Kansas City was able to do the previous year. They went out and traded for Orlando Brown, and that clearly worked for him. That's another guy that Cincinnati could potentially look at going after.
Yeah, and we discussed this last week about Cincinnati. Actually, was that's what they really need to focus on this draft is shoring up their O line, and whether or not they do that through the draft itself or through trading away their draft capital. And that could get very interesting because we were discussing that it could become a bit of a bidding war between Pittsburgh and Cincinnati over Brandon Sheriff.
Yeah,
And so
that's a very real possibility.
Yeah, could you imagine Cincinnati going out getting Laramie Tunsil and then also landing Brandon Sheriff? Joe Burrow could potentially be the most protected quarterback in the league next year, and imagine
they would win probably 3 out of 5 Super Bowls.
Yeah,
Yeah.
If you give Joe Burrow an actual offensive line in front of him, the dude got sacked 9 times in an AFC playoff game against one of the toughest teams out there and was still able to pull out a win. And you know what? He was one missed offside call away from, let's be real here, if they called that offside against Aaron Donald, the Bengals were winning that Super Bowl.
Yep.
Well, and the other thing too is like, they make these trades. I think all 3 of us could confidently say that if you had to bet on a team coming out of the AFC, it would be the Bengals overnight. Like, they'd be the overwhelming favorite, even over Kansas City and Buffalo. And I never thought I'd say something like that, but they certainly would be.
Yeah, I never thought I'd agree with something like that, but you are correct, 100%.
Yep. Again, if you trade for a guy like Laramie Tunsil and go after Brandon Sheriff, and then even in that second round with that second round pick, you go after another offensive lineman there, because again, that's not something that you guys brought up, but adding that third key offensive line, because I think we all forget a second round offensive lineman is still a phenomenal offensive lineman, and most of the time is a starting player at that position, and that instantly just solidifies Joe Burrow. It goes, okay, you're not being touched. You aren't being touched.
But, obviously, with the reality of the NFL, the worst position for Pittsburgh on their offensive line was right guard. I still like Brandon Sheriff going to Pittsburgh, and I don't think they're dumb enough. They would pay an extra $2 to $5 million a year to make sure he didn't go to Cincinnati.
Yeah, and I think so. And it really would be. It really would be one of those things. You are going to see a bidding war between the Steelers and the Bengals for Brandon Sheriff because those are his best 2 options. He's not going to go to Chicago. Chicago isn't going to go out and spend that much money on a guy. I know there have been people in the Chicago Bears media who have been saying like, oh, the Bears should really go out and spend that much money. I'm going, yeah, we have like $38 million in cap. But no, like we need to upgrade our offensive line for sure. But we can go out there and find cheaper pieces who are going to do a serviceable job. We're not a Super Bowl caliber team next year, and you're not spending that money. But yeah, and I agree with one of the people in the chat. I think the Steelers would ultimately win that war because again, it doesn't matter who gives them more money. It's Brandon Sheriff is going to decide where he wants to go. And I think for Brandon Sheriff, he's looking at the Steelers line and going, they do have some better pieces that he can help grow and develop, because we look at veteran players, they're not just brought in to be, that good veteran player that they are. They're also brought in kind of as a player coach and helping these younger guys move up. So yeah.
Well, and that's what Pittsburgh was missing on the O-line this year, because we didn't have Marquise Pouncey. He retired last year. But as I mentioned a couple weeks ago, he is working with Kendrick Green this offseason to help, develop him further. And I think that's going to be a great thing. And could you imagine throwing Brandon Sheriff onto that right guard on Kendrick Green's right shoulder? You've got that, and then you take an offensive tackle in the first round and the second round. You get that right tackle, you get that left guard. You are set, and that is where we then become the running team in the league. We would be competing with the Titans and Derrick Henry on which team is going to run the ball the best next season. And so ultimately,
at the end of the day, it's easy for us to talk about making all these trades when, in fact, the true value of all these first round picks that we always, I guess, seem to overlook as fans is the fact that you got an offensive lineman making, for example, Tristan Wirfs, like what, $8 million a year for 4 years, one of the best left tackles in the game. So that financial side of it is also something that, a cash-strapped team like the Bengals would probably prefer to take, because they would rather take the risk and go, well, maybe we can sign 2 offensive linemen and draft a really good one. Yes. And same with the Steelers as well, right? Maybe they don't want to go out and spend all the money to go get Brandon Sheriff. They look at the draft and go, we can get a guy for $8 million that might be as good.
No. Well, and that's what it would be. It would be a one or the other. We're either going for someone like a Brandon Sheriff, or we're going after somebody like a Deshaun Watson. If you pay an offensive lineman, you're not going to be able to pay a quarterback, and you're going to have to Mason Rudolph steer. Or exactly. Maybe somebody like some free agent that we managed to sign, like Marcus Mariota.
Yeah, I completely agree.
But we've been talking about our teams a lot in this draft. We've overlooked the Bears because, of course, they traded away their first round pick last year to trade up to get Justin Fields. They traded that to the Giants. So your Bears, their first pick is the 7th pick in the second round. Who do you like them taking?
Yeah, so 39th.
Yeah.
There are 4 guys that I have written down here. 2 I don't really think are going to be there, but I would like. My number 1 guy that I think is going to be there is Zion Johnson, guard from Boston College. Newly acquired GM for the Bears, Ryan Poles. He's a former center from Boston College, and he has come out and said, we are going to improve this offensive line. And I look at Zion Johnson, and I really look at him and say, this is a guy, he has a little bit of meanness to him. He's got some aggression out there. He protects his quarterback, and he's a guy who's had to work at really, truly getting that opportunity to, he's really built himself and moved forward for that team, for Boston College. And I think, Ryan Poles, he's going to look at Zion Williams and truly go, you know what, I'm going to bring in a kid from my alma mater and protect Justin Fields. And because honestly, for this draft, for the Chicago Bears, it really is going to be, how do we help Justin Fields, whether it's protection or whether it's in the receiving game. But yeah, for me, I think Zion Johnson has to be the number 1 choice, because in the area, that's where he's kind of slated to go around, in that he could end up going anywhere from, I think, 25 to 45. He's kind of in that weird area of where some teams are definitely going to overlook him, because one thing we always forget is the teams in the 20s to 32 range, there's always 2 or 3 teams that just end up going completely off the draft board and draft someone who everyone has in like the 3rd round, where we're just like, what are you doing? And then we'll see a couple of 2nd round pick or guys, or realistic 2nd round pick guys that get selected in the 1st round. I think Zion Johnson, if he does go to 39, I don't even think it's a question. I think the Bears jump on that pick as fast as humanly possible. Another guy that I look at, the only way I'm not taking Zion Williams or not Zion Williams, Zion Johnson, if he's there, is that if Drake London, wide receiver out of USC, is there. This kid, for me, at the beginning of the college season, he was my number one wide receiver prospect going into this year's draft. He is 6'5", 230 pounds. He can run a 4.4. He is a big dude who can move. He has phenomenal hands. He got hurt this year. He ended his college season and college career early because he got hurt. And he was dealing with not the best quarterback situation. I look at that and I go, the Bears are going to be losing Allen Robinson, who is a big body, big reception receiver. You throw Drake London on the opposite side of Darnell Mooney. Holy shit, do you have a scary set of receivers right there. You know, Darnell Mooney is one of those guys, you put the ball in his hands, he's going to make plays, and he's going to be dangerous no matter what. He's kind of like the Tyreek Hill of this offense. But you add Drake London on the opposite side, that is a fearsome tandem. Obviously, I would like to focus on the offensive line a little bit and build that team up, but we just saw what the Cincinnati Bengals did. You know, as opposed to going for two what could have been potentially generational talent offensive linemen with Sewell and Slater, they decided to go Jamar Chase because of the connection that they had. And that leads me to my third guy that I have, and this is kind of my second realistic option who I think is going to be there, which is Chris Olave, wide receiver from Ohio State. Justin Fields and Olave have a phenomenal connection. When Justin Fields was at Ohio State, he was his number one guy. And I think if you bring Olave into the Bears room, you are very much going to see that connection similar to a Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow. I don't think Olave is on the same level as Jamar Chase by any means, but you're going to see that same level of connection and just willingness to, and just that trust factor that they have together.
Yeah, that immediate chemistry.
Exactly.
Having played together in college.
Yeah. And then my third kind of guy who I do believe is going to be there, but if those three other guys are both gone, it's another wide receiver, Christian Watson, wide receiver from North Dakota State. Very similar to Drake London. The dude is 6'5", 220 pounds, and he almost will run in the 4.3s. I'll be interested to see this upcoming weekend what his 40 times for the combine is going to be, because that's another thing is this weekend or next weekend is the start of the NFL combine. But yeah, this is another guy who he's just a big body. He can move really well, has phenomenal hands, and I think will be an amazing large target on the opposite side of Darnell Mooney. So for me, those are kind of my four guys. Realistically, I would love Zion Johnson as my number one. I don't think Drake London is going to be there, but if he's there, I would be upset if they didn't take him. But yeah, I think my two realistic guys are Zion Johnson and Chris Olave. Those are my guys.
Seems to be quite wide receiver heavy for you.
Well,
looking for more targets for Justin Fields, eh?
The thing is for the Chicago Bears right now at this current moment, there is only one player on the Chicago Bears roster that is under contract that is a wide receiver, and that's Darnell Mooney. Allen Robinson is gone. All of our other wide receivers we only have one rostered wide receiver right now. I do think the Bears are going to bring back Jakeem Grant, who was a wide receiver, but he is more of a return specialist who has upside in the wide receiver category, but he's not one of those guys that you're putting down as your number 2. He's your number 3 at best, but he's your gimmick number 4. But yeah, the Bears need to bring in some wide receiver help, and you got to do that in the draft. And the reason that I have 3 wide receivers in that second round for that pick is because at that current spot, Zion Johnson is really the only valuable offensive lineman at that time. At that, where the Bears are picking there's a lot of really good edge rushers, there's a lot of good corners, there's some D linemen there, which I think the Bears do need some more D linemen and corners, but they're not the biggest needs, and I would rather go help, Justin Fields, who should be the focal point of this team's focus for not only this year, but every year moving forward. If we truly believe he is our franchise guy and he can take us to the promised lands, you got to put the pieces around him, whether that's helping him in the interior or up front with the offensive line or the pass catchers.
So let me pose this question at you. If that offensive tackle isn't available and only your third choice of those wide receivers is there, as a Bears GM, do you accept a trade offer of a wide receiver from another team for that second round pick? For example, say Chase Claypool.
No. And
No?
the reason that I do that is that if all three of those wide receivers are gone and Zion Johnson is gone, you're trading back. I honestly genuinely think the Bears are going to end up trading back regardless. They don't have a lot of picks this year, and for a team that is in a rebuilding stage, you need picks. And I think Ryan Poles, he's probably going to move back. He's not going to move back to the latest part of the second round. He's probably going to move back to closer to the middle of the second round and accumulate maybe a third and a couple of mid-round to later picks either this year or next year. But yeah, it's one of those things. I don't like the idea of trading for a guy like Chase Claypool. He's a phenomenal talent. He is. But one thing Chicago has always been is they have no tolerance for drama in the locker room. Every single time that they have a guy that is trying to get a little too big, for the city or the team, look at Martellus Bennett, look at Brandon Marshall. It was like, we're going to deal with your shit for the year, but then you are gone. Like, you are not bigger. This isn't fully around you. That's one of the reasons that they went out and traded for Khalil Mack. How often do you hear Khalil Mack going, me, 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 me? As a Chicago Bears fan and who, watches all their press conferences and this, that, and the other thing, you can barely get 5 words out of Khalil Mack. So, yeah.
I feel you there. Why do you think all the trades I come up with have Chase Claypool packaged into them?
It's
Because
to get
if
rid
Boy
of him.
doesn't smarten up, he's going to be shipped out pretty quick.
I agree.
Yeah, do all the TikTok dances you want, but stop costing us first downs and time on the clock.
No offense, Brandon, but the Bears are probably in the roughest spot of any team. They're going to take it on the chin this year.
Without a doubt. I think the Bears are going to be.
It sucks for Justin Fields. It sucks for Justin Fields that he's in this position.
It is. I think the Bears are going to be better this year than they were last year for sure, but I don't think it's going to be dramatically better. I think, we had 5 wins this year. I think going into next season, I think it's realistic to look at the team and go, they can get 7 wins. And again, as a team who has a phenomenal defense still, they're still going to have to take it on the chin because they are a rebuilding team that luckily they have a couple of really good pieces in set for both the offense and the defensive side of the ball. Defensive side of the ball, I believe they have easily the best young middle linebacker in football. You just look at the numbers that he was able to do and the fact that he got snubbed from the Pro Bowl. As soon as you see these guys like, why am I forgetting Bobby Wagner, when he retires, Roquan Smith is easily taking that Pro Bowl spot and that all-pro linebacker spot every single year. It's just going to be a question of who has the better statistical year between him and Fred Warner, in the NFC. And, you have Jalen Johnson, who, in my opinion, is an elite corner. He just needs help on the other side. He was shutting down guys constantly this year. Offensive side of the ball, you have, Darnell Mooney at the wide receiver standpoint, who I think this year coming up, he's going to solidify himself as a top 15 wide receiver in the NFL. He just showed this year with Matt Nagy and how bad his play calling was. He was like, you know what? I shouldn't be putting up the numbers that I am, but I'm going to constantly be getting open, and I'm just going to be making plays for our young rookie quarterback. I do think Justin Fields is going to be improved. And yeah, David Montgomery is a top 5 NFL back. without a doubt, David Montgomery is a top 5 running back in the NFL.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know,
mean,
man. I would dispute that one.
Yeah, I don't know if he's quite top 5. He's top 10 for sure, but I don't know about top 5. And I mean,
there's some pretty mean running backs out there right now. Even Joe Mixon is pretty badass.
Well, yeah, I can think of 4 immediately in Najee Harris, Derrick Henry, Joe Mixon, and Jonathan Taylor.
And 5th right there is David Montgomery.
What about Ezekiel Elliott?
I think David Montgomery is a better running back than Ezekiel Elliott. The reason that I say this is that with how bad the offensive line was at protecting Justin Fields this year.
Leonard Fournette is slept on too. He's a fantastic.
He's a good running back, but are you putting him as your premier running back that you are going to rely on day in, day out?
Yes.
Yeah. Christian McCaffrey, if he can stay healthy.
That's the thing, is Christian McCaffrey can't stay healthy at the moment.
Yeah.
We haven't seen a healthy Christian McCaffrey the last 3 years. But the point that I was making about the offensive line is with how bad that offensive line was for protecting Justin Fields, it was even worse at opening up holes for David Montgomery. And yet he was still able to go over 1,000 yards all purpose from the air and the rushing game. And he was out for 6 weeks on injury. You constantly see this, and the last 2 years he was in the top 5 for rushing yards. You know, in his 3 years as being a running back, he's always been in top 5 for, you know, all-purpose yards. And he's been doing that on a absolutely dog shit, you know, Matt Nagy run offense.
Well, and I mean, one thing your Bears will have going for them next year that Josh and I can't say the same about is you could potentially be playing in a division where every other team is going through some growing pains as well. Because you could have a Green Bay Packers with no Aaron Rodgers. You could have a Minnesota Vikings with no Kirk Cousins, which means none of those teams really have a true identity yet.
True.
And even with a 5-win team this year, if that is how the NFC North shakes out, you could still have a shot at seeing some playoff football next year. Whereas Washington, even if they go out and they get a Russell Wilson, you know, and they shore up their offense that way, they still have that phenomenal Dallas Cowboys defense that they're going to have to be going up against and fighting for a playoff spot with, you know. And even my Pittsburgh Steelers, if we go out and get a Deshaun Watson or draft a quarterback, we still have Joe Burrow to contend with, and if Lamar Jackson can stay healthy, a potentially dynamic Baltimore Ravens team. I'm not going to include the Browns in there because they could have a superstar at every position on that damn team, and they would still find a way to lose. Oh, your sound has gone out there, Brendan.
He came back there.
Are you back there yet? No. No. I don't know what's happened to you. You are out. But yeah, now we can just sort of talk.
Hey, in all fairness, I'm just not a Justin Fields believer, you know, and it's hard for me to say. I don't see it in the kid, and it's hard for me because, you know, I don't.
Oh,
really
here we
have a
go.
good
I'm
team,
back.
and I'm not saying we're better, but I don't know. I feel bad for him. I think it's a bad. I hated he was drafted there when he was drafted there because he is a developing quarterback. Matt Nagy's a defensive coach. They have no pieces. They're an aging roster. It just is such a desperation move, and I'm sad that kid got sat at that table.
Well, that's where this year could be better for him because they've moved on from Matt Nagy. So. They have put some tools around him on the sideline that I think will benefit him more. I think we will see a very good sophomore year out of Justin Fields next year. He is going to be the make and break of that team. It's going to be him and Khalil Mack. Khalil Mack has to stay healthy, and he has to get that defense rolling over teams regularly. And then Justin Fields needs to get out of that Ohio State mindset of, you know, run the ball first, and he's got to really settle in and learn how to go. He's going to have to take some sacks. You know, he ran out of the sack a lot last year. He's going to have to stand in that pocket and take a few hits this year to really show the league and the rest of us that are doubters that he's going to be capable of being that that first Chicago Bears Hall of Fame quarterback.
I completely agree with you, and like you're not going to hear an argument for me on that standpoint. I look at Justin Fields and I go, next year you really have to prove to everyone that you are the guy, because I always say for a rookie quarterback, you have to throw away that year. Doesn't matter if it was good, doesn't matter if it was bad. You have to throw that year away because it is a rookie year. Teams don't know you yet, and if you look really good, you just have to boil that down to teams don't know you yet. They don't know how to scheme you up against. And if it's a bad year, you have to look at it and go, well, you're a rookie, you were learning. The reason I have hope for, Justin Fields' development is that Eberflus, our new head coach, went out and made a massive signing, and this was the key at the offensive coordinator position. He went out and stole Luke Getsy from the Green Bay Packers. Aaron Rodgers has been talking about this guy and saying this is one of the, he's a phenomenal mind. You listen to all the Green Bay Packers, players that had him, they're disappointed to see him leave. Listening to the way that he's talking, he goes, we're not going to make an offense of going, this is my offense. He's going to build his offense around the players that he currently has and what their strengths are. This is something that Chicago hasn't had. An offensive coordinator and a guy that looks like he could be a head coach next year if he makes Justin Fields look like a world beater.
Well, and that is a key signing for Chicago as well, because that is exactly what Justin Fields needs to become, is like Aaron Rodgers. We need to see a quarterback that's standing in there in the pocket and just delivering darts, dropping dimes, and then all of a sudden he's running outside the pocket and getting a 25-yard first down, and everybody goes, we forgot he can run, just like Aaron Rodgers.
And that's exactly
everybody forgets that Aaron Rodgers is able to go outside the pocket and run for those first downs, even at the age he's at now. And that is exactly the type of quarterback that Justin Fields needs to project himself after. That's what he needs to become.
And when you truly look at what Justin Fields was capable of doing at Ohio State, obviously the running numbers were a lot more because it's college. If you have a semi-mobile quarterback, they're going to run you as if you're running back a lot of the times. But when you looked at Justin Fields in college, the 2 years that he played at the starting position, he had numbers very similar to Aaron Rodgers. And when I say that is he had high touchdowns, low interceptions. So I agree with you. He needs to play the game much like an Aaron Rodgers, and I think that's his ceiling, is to play a game like that, because we've already seen he's capable of doing that at a high level. Because at college, he never turned the ball over. This year, he had an offensive line that couldn't protect him. There was a lot of batted balls. There was, obviously there was some rookie mistakes because you're playing in the best league in the world and you're still trying to figure that out. But, I think Luke Getsy is definitely going to help Justin Fields in that progression. I agree with you. He needs to play the game like Aaron Rodgers, where he's staying in the pocket, he's making those quick, decisive reads and putting the ball into his playmaker's hands, and he's also not at every opportunity going, okay, well, it's breaking down, I'm going to run. You have to let the play develop. And I completely agree with you there, Sterling, that's what the Bears, and especially Luke Getsy, needs to do for Justin Fields. But yeah, so last week, Sterling, you and I gave some free agents and just kind of general talk about our teams. Josh, unfortunately, you were supposed to be here with us, but you got caught up in some, we'll just say some bullshit. That we'll leave it at that. And you weren't unfortunately allowed to make it. But yeah, so I want you to give us 3 free agents that you reasonably think the Washington Commanders are going to go after.
I definitely think Allen Robinson's going to be on that left receiver side big time. They need to pair someone with Terry McLaurin. I think truthfully that's our biggest need. another free agent I'd like to go out and potentially snag as well. I'd like to see Leonard Fournette in our backfield. And of course, honestly, I'd like us to retain Brandon Sheriff as much as it's not realistic. It still could be. You know, we offered him an $18 million a year contract for 5 years for at $18 million a year. I think he'll consider that and maybe even up it to 20 if we really want to keep him. But I'd like to see Brandon Sheriff, Allen Robinson, and potentially a free agent running back. I'm not too picky on who it is.
Okay. Yeah. No, all those picks.
Allen Robinson and Leonard Fournette for sure. You know, really shoring up that offense. But I mean, if you just don't make a trade, you still don't have a quarterback to throw the ball to Allen Robinson.
And that's one thing that I was going to mention.
Is Taylor Heineke? Can you convince me that any of the free agents are better than Taylor Heineke though? You know, like I don't know. I can't confidently say yes. That's the thing. You know, like so for example, I know he's young and he's a rookie, but with no offensive line, anyone's going to look that bad. You know, anyone's going to look that bad. But for me, the biggest thing for me is I'm not sure Marcus Mariota or any of these other free agents could necessarily be like, I know for a fact that Mitch Trubisky would get beat out in camp by Taylor Heineke. I think Marcus Mariota might. He'd be the only one that would interest me. Jimmy Garoppolo would probably provide the same record that we had this year with the same roster. You know, this isn't a loaded 49ers team. So, you know, if we had to continue with the players we had, I would just want to give this kid more pieces to work with because we really don't have any other wide receivers. Can you guys honestly name anyone else besides Terry McLaurin on our team?
I could not.
No, not on the offensive side. Definitely not.
There you go. So that's the problem right there. You're giving this guy, you know, chicken shit and telling him to make chicken salad. It's not there.
Yeah.
I'll
throw one out that you would probably hate, but I think would be a really good fit, especially if you get Fournette and Robinson, and that would be Nick Foles, because he's got much more experience and poise than Tyler Heineke. You know, Heineke, he looked panicked a lot of the time he was playing last year.
Yeah.
And I think Nick Foles would be a good fit to compete for that job. If Heineke can legit beat him out for that position, then great. But I think Nick Foles would be a really good fit in Washington for next season.
So the reason I know for a fact we're not going to go get Nick Foles, I know for a fact we're not. They're either going to draft a quarterback or trade for a quarterback, because if you're Ron Rivera, I think you're getting fired if you go out and get Nick Foles as your answer.
Yep.
I think they fire you the next season. I think they fire you, no question. If you don't make the playoffs with Nick Foles, and Ron Rivera's been telling the fans, you know, like, we need to deal with the quarterback position. It's clearly a position in need, and that's your answer is Nick Foles. You're fired.
Yes. I'm gonna throw one. I'm gonna throw one monkey in. I'm gonna throw one wrench into your barrel of monkeys here. Allen Robinson is probably not going to go to Washington for the simple reason of when he was in Jacksonville, who was his quarterback? Blake Bortles. When he was in Chicago, who were the quarterbacks that he had to deal with? Mitch Trubisky, Nick Foles, and then Justin Fields, a rookie Justin Fields, he got sabotaged this year and he really didn't play. He didn't really want to be there. Allen Robinson, he's going to sign with a team that has an established quarterback and that is going to give him the best opportunity to play in the playoffs and to have a opportunity at a Super Bowl. And the reason that I say this is because, again, he's had those quarterbacks. If he were to go to Washington, all that's going to happen for him is he's going to be brought into the same situation that he's had the last, 8 years of his career, where it has been question marks at quarterback. Because when he came into Chicago, there was question marks with Trubisky. And then when Justin Fields was drafted here, there was still question marks. Obviously, when we traded for Nick Foles, there was question marks there. There was always question marks with Blake Bortles. And so for Allen Robinson, he is tired of question marks. He does not want to be around an organization that has question marks. Yeah, you might offer him $25 million a year, but it's one of those things he's going, I don't care how much money
he would at 30 years old, a 4-year deal at $25 million a year, he would sign that. He would for sure sign that.
But for instance, if the Kansas City Chiefs offer him a $15 million deal over 3 years, $15 million a year, he's going to sign with the Chiefs all day long because he gets to play with an established team, with an established quarterback that he does not have to have question marks around.
Can the Chiefs afford that?
I more or less threw the Chiefs out there as just a placeholder.
Because
fair, but I mean that statement
born.
goes for many of the top teams out there right now. Is
100%.
The reason Allen Robinson has been in this position is because he wants all this money.
Yes.
And so that's where he's got to make a decision. Is he going to take less money to go to a Super Bowl caliber team finally? If not, then he's going to have to sign with a team like Washington to get that big paycheck that he seems to always want.
He's right. And he's never been able to get that big payday throughout his career. And he got franchise tagged this year because I remember when he hit the free agent market, he was telling teams, I'm not signing for anything less than $22 million. And
that was also with a Matt Nagy team and question marks at quarterback.
I hear you. But I think he's right. I think Washington would definitely say, you want 22? Here's 22. We'll give you it. And I think he'd consider. He's been underpaid his whole career.
He has been underpaid his whole career, definitely, and I think Allen Robinson is one of those guys that definitely deserves to be paid in the NFL. But again, he's all like what we said, he is getting close to 30, if he's not already at 30. I think at this point he's more looking at it going like, I might take a year or two with less money to go play for that caliber team and then take that big payday, where at that moment it doesn't really matter. You know, I'm getting paid all the money that I can in the world. You know, there could be a potential that he goes to the Chargers. You know, Justin Herbert there. They have some cap space. For instance, they offer him, they say, hey, Allen, we want you down here for 2 years. We're going to give you $30 million over those 2 years, so 15 a year. We're going to go try to win a Super Bowl. We have this established quarterback in Justin Herbert. You come here, take us over that edge. But yeah, I do look at that Washington. That's definitely not a bad spot if they are willing to pay him a bunch of money. But I think if he does get an offer that is less money to go to a established team with an established quarterback, I think he's taking that offer. But I don't hate him going to Washington.
If he's smart, then he would take less money for sure. I question whether he's going to make that decision or not. You know, and I think Josh is right. Like, if Washington offers him $25 million, he's more likely to take that over 4 years than he would to go, oh, I'm going to go play in LA for 2 years at 15.
For sure. And you know what? This is all going to be, you know, kind of figured out here within the next month or so, because Allen Robinson, in my opinion, he's going to be one of those day one signs. You know, yes. The second free agency opens up, a team is going to snatch him up pretty quickly.
He might wait to see where the quarterback's land first.
True.
Yeah.
Oh, Josh, you're breaking up there. Funny enough, we are having a little bit of audio troubles on my end now with Joshy boy.
All right, just a bad sound day for us today.
Right? Yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Oh, try it again, Josh.
How about now?
There we go. So what were you trying to say? Yeah, we got you.
No, I think he'd take the money. I really do. I think he'd take the money.
I think
even if he wins a Super Bowl, will he really be considered one of the greatest of all time?
No.
I think he knows that. With or without a Super Bowl, and this is just me personally, like, I love winning, but at the same time, if I'm going to be overpaid by $5 to $6 million a year, I'm probably going to take it.
Fair. And you know what? He very well might just take that deal where he just looks at it and goes, you know what? I'll never win a Super Bowl, whatever, but I'm going to be making a shit ton of money while I'm at it.
Well, the thing is, like, let's not get too excited here. Like, if we trade for Russell Wilson and sign him in free agency, him and Terry McLaurin can definitely deal with the Dallas Cowboys defense.
Oh, without a doubt.
All three of those guys
Without a doubt.
could definitely do that.
Mhm.
That is an upgrade from DK Metcalf and
Yeah.
who's the other gentleman there?
No. Yeah, and that's what I was just going to say.
Tyler
That's why I
Lockett.
think Allen Robinson will wait. Like, if Washington goes out and manages to land a trade for Russell Wilson, and then
Or
they
Deshaun
sign
Watson.
Leonard
Or Deshaun Watson.
or Deshaun Watson, and then they land Leonard Fournette at a running back spot, I think Allen Robinson looks at that and goes, okay, well, they weren't a Super Bowl contender, but now they're definitely a playoff contender, and maybe I'm the one that can push them over that hump, and
For
they're
sure.
offering me a ridiculous amount of money.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a fair point. Like, if
It
they can
is.
land that quarterback and he's still available as a free agent, I think Washington is a very viable landing spot for Allen Robinson.
Without a doubt. But the quarterback has to be there, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, so we got your 3 free agents that you would like to bring in. What's one player from the team that you would like to see them cut?
Antonio Gibson.
Antonio Gibson?
Oh, I hate him. He fumbles the ball every game, and for some reason, Ron thinks this guy's the next Christian McCaffrey. He's built like a receiver, and he runs up the gut with his head higher than the lineman. He's just the most irritating player to watch.
Alright.
I'm a little surprised. I thought you were going to say Montez Sweat.
No. Montez, despite what I think about Montez, I think he's a first round bust, but I can depend on Montez for 5 to 6 sacks a year. I know I can get that from him on a minimum basis, but I would take that over a guy that fumbles the ball 75% of the games he plays in.
Fair enough. And,
Yeah.
we move right into my next question. If you had to make one trade, either bringing a guy in or trading a guy out of your team, who do you think?
Daron Payne would be the guy I traded out. I would trade him for a first round pick this year and redraft a defensive lineman just to reset a rookie on a 4-year deal.
Yeah.
That's what I would do because, I mean, when you're throwing punches at a team captain, I think you should be tossed. I have no room for that as a fan. I don't care if you're playing, you're the only 2 starters on that defense for that game against Dallas. What are you doing punching each other? Like, why did you throw a punch at Jonathan Allen? That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So that kind of thing can happen on the sidelines. And, the fan base won't forget that very easily. But at the same time, I think he needs to go. And out of all of them that are underwhelming, he's up there in terms of, it's his 4th year. He needs a payday, and he's good for plugging that gap. But he only pressures 2 or 3 times a year, and he's been consistently a little underwhelming at times, more so than Montez Sweat. So I believe he deserves to be traded in a package if we could get the right deal for him.
Oh, for sure. And I definitely think a team would be willing to go out and send a first round pick for Daron Payne because he is a phenomenal run stuffer. His upside as a pass rusher isn't as high as you would necessarily like, but if you're a team that's running a 4-3 and you need your D tackles to be those really big run stuffers, yeah, that would definitely be a situation I could see.
For example, could we potentially go to a team that finished decently high, let's say the bottom half of 20 to 25. You go in there and say, hey, we'll give you a pass rusher who's definitely worthy of a first round pick. Needs a new deal though. Okay, so you give him over, and we'll take a guy that can maybe get fill that gap of we need 2 pressures and a couple. Like, we just need a 4th guy on that line. He's if he turns out to be better, great. Do I think it's easy for someone to match his numbers? Absolutely.
Yeah. So 2 trade possibilities that I'm looking at here for potential Daron Payne are the Cardinals and the Titans. What would you feel about trading him to one of those 2 teams?
So easily, and I think it's a good trade for everyone involved.
Yep.
I think they could use him a bit better than we do, both of those teams. And I think the first round pick we get there, any defensive lineman would be good at plugging those gaps at a much cheaper deal than what we're going to afford to pay him because we got to pay Chase and we got to pay Terry here this year. So
you still have a couple more years for Chase.
Yeah, but you always got to anticipate having some cleared money, right? Like,
without a doubt.
All 4 of those guys can't get paid.
No.
Or one of them is going to be the odd man out.
Yes.
And if it had to be him or Sweat, I would keep Sweat over Payne. just because Sweat isn't throwing punches at people on the sideline too. Like that's a notable aspect. You want to talk about Chase Claypool potentially, dancing and missing a first down. That sucks, but nothing worse than seeing your teammates fist fighting on the sideline.
Well, I mean, they were fighting in the locker room. Fitzpatrick and Claypool throwing punches at each other a couple times.
That's true. That is true. But it wasn't on national television.
That's true as well. Yes. Yeah.
For everyone to
I
make
agree
fun
with you
of
on the
us
Titans,
for a
but
week.
that's a really unique trait because there's a couple other teams I could see jumping on that in Buffalo Bills or even the New England Patriots. Bill Belichick likes a guy that's a little on edge that he can rein in.
And that's the thing. And like I said, anyone in the league would look at that trade and go, that's a pretty damn good risk for us. And for Washington, it's a pretty damn good risk for us too, because it saves us from that potential payday we have to give them. So it's a win-win for everyone.
Mm-hmm. And gets you guys a second pick in the first round as well.
Which is always insanely valuable.
Just to not even necessarily draft a quarterback or whatever, but just even, just another plug gap defensive lineman, which this draft is full of.
Yeah, I have to agree. There are some fun, like there's a couple of kids from Georgia that would fit right into that Washington defensive line right there.
And imagine being mentored by Jonathan Allen and, like having a big center, interior lineman to help mentor you for your career. Like 4 years of just having one of the best interior tackle on the defensive line, help coach you, train you, and everything else.
Yeah,
and
take you under his wing.
Like people wouldn't expect you to be the best player on that line.
No.
That pressure's evaded you. You're not the superstar that has to go get in a pressured sack in 4th and 2. But if you get it, you're going to be the hero. It's a good situation for the kid.
Yeah, I have to agree with you on that one. Well, boys, I think this has been a phenomenal podcast today. Definitely.
I had a lot of fun today. I really did.
Oh yeah, again, we're always going to joke about this, but let's see if we can get it 2 weeks in a row. We
can get that camera of yours working too.
Yeah, I was talking to Brendan about that before the podcast. It has something to do with my Mac setting. I put a post on Reddit about it last night, and no one's commented yet, but I'll see if someone has. But see if they can maybe help me with the technical part of it.
But yeah, this has been a phenomenal podcast today. For what we all consider to be a pretty light news week in the NFL, not necessarily just the NFL, but kind of in sports in general, there really hasn't been anything too insane to happen. I felt like we had a really good show today. But yeah, I'm Brendan Donald. I want to thank Sterling and both Josh for joining today, and would like to thank all of you for sticking by and chatting with us here, and we will see you next week again on Saturday.
Alrighty, everyone, have a good week.